Hi, Denise Matteau here. Um, this is my channel, Visions of Mercy. Visions of Mercy is about the spiritual dimensions of life. And it's going to, like so much else that is around us, it will evolve, okay? I want to start out by talking about the modern times that we're in are the times that are called the apocalypse or the revelation, the unveiling. And you don't have to be Christian to see this. And it's a time that is spoken of in other traditions as well. If I speak in Christian terms, it's because I am a product of Christian culture. I grew up Catholic. I am Christian. I am Catholic. But I see the world with open eyes. And I don't believe God limits himself to one particular tradition. He speaks to all of us if we have ears to hear. Okay, dimensions, the spiritual world. I like to recommend a man named Anthony Patch, somebody whose videos and interviews you might look up. He's written books too, all on quantum physics and the spiritual realms of the physicist, the physics that's going on today. One of his colleagues, Johnny Whistler, on the Kev Baker Show, recently said something that made me hit the pause button and play it back and have him say it again. And I went, aha. They were talking about a principle in quantum mechanics that's very hard for people to understand, is that when the scientist observes something in measuring these quantum particles at CERN, C-E-R-N, CERN, that collapse. So if you look at it, it collapses. And he commented that isn't this something of what happens in dreams? When we try to remember our dream, we wake up with a vivid experience, knowing, oh, I dreamed this. Then we turn to tell somebody what we dreamed about. We can't quite capture it, and it's gone. And I thought, aha, that explains a lot. It explains what goes on in our waking life when we can't quite express something, but we know it. You know, there's something about, you meet someone and there's something about that person. I've had the experience numerous times in my life. I'd be somewhere just casually walking by a certain place or in a certain situation, and it would be almost like something touches me and says, wait a minute, notice this. This is going to be important in your future. And it will be something trivial. It will be, this setting is going to be important, or this name is going to be important. And later on, events would happen, and I would either find myself going back to that place. In one case, I had a job. And it was very strange because when I was living in Boston, I first arrived there, I wandered around the city and looked at everything. And there was a spot where something kind of clutched me and said, you're going to come back here. I had no clue what it was. I went on to get several jobs over a couple of years. I worked here and there. And then, lo and behold, one day when I was out looking for, I was going from waitress job to waitress job, I found myself in that same neighborhood, walked in, and had the most interesting discussion with, not with the owner, but with the mother, who felt it was very important to hire me. The owner was actually her daughter. And I didn't last very long there. It was very strange. A cluster of things happened. Her daughter, frankly, wasn't quite right in the head. And that was part of what was going on. And she saw me, clicked ethnically with me because we're both French, and I'm older. So I think she just clutched at me as an ally in her battle to keep the business, the family business, afloat with her, frankly, screw loose daughter in charge. And then, in the brief time that I worked there, I had an encounter with somebody who was important in my family life. Not somebody I knew personally, but somebody who was known to relatives, who came in as a customer and mistook me for my sister. And I immediately realized who he was. And it was awkward. It was very strange, because my sister would never be found handling a lunch counter. It was a very fine, high-end lunch counter, but nevertheless, that's not the kind of work she did. And this man did a double take, and all I knew at first was there was something odd about him. He left the line, he went and he spoke to one of the other workers. They had a rapid-fire conversation, both looking at me and the worker pointing. And then I guess he was asking her my name. It was very strange. And because of the family tensions, I didn't stay on. And that incident was just very odd. And then, years later, because that was just a brief little, waitress job. When you're an artist, you grab waitress jobs like fast food restaurant lunches, really. You use them and lose them. And, but that incident was very important in understanding my family. But the point of this story was that there was no reason for me to have that twinge, and it's not something that happens to me all the time. Another time that it happened, and I really don't know too many other times out of these two that I'm speaking of, was I was in Austin. When I first moved to Austin, again, a very similar thing. What I do when I move to a new city is I spend a lot of time just riding buses and walking around and getting to know the city, getting to appreciate different parts of it. And I often also do street painting. I was doing pastels at that time. And one day, when I was walking through a neighborhood and I was setting up to do pastels, I looked around and there was a street. It was Nueces Street. I had never seen the word Nueces, and I had no reason to notice it. I mean, I was in a new city with all kinds of new street names, most of them Hispanic-leaning names. And I said, oh, and I felt the twinge. The twinge was not that this spot would be important, because it wasn't. But it was, that name is important. That word's important. Okay. And about 3 years later, something happened. My daughter died. She was 34 years old. She died in Massachusetts. I was still in Austin. Got the news. And after her death, after the memorial and everything, and I was trying to start over, I found myself planning just to travel. And I wasn't going to settle down anywhere. I was just going to travel for a while until I could find where the Lord wants me to settle down, because I had been in Austin hoping my daughter would join me there. But she died before she could get there. Somebody suggested to me to move to Corpus Christi, where I now live. And I immediately, oh yes, that's where I want to be, because I wanted to be by the seashore, and this person was telling me that, you can afford Corpus Christi. I mean, I couldn't afford to go back to Massachusetts and live on Cape Cod, even if I wanted to, but I could afford Corpus Christi. I didn't know anything about Corpus Christi. I mean, I knew it was in Texas, and I knew it was on the Gulf Coast. That was it. So I moved down here. And I'm now living on the banks of the Nueces River, right at the mouth of the river into the bay. I have a view out one side. If I squint and look far enough, I can see into the Gulf of Mexico, but I'm really looking at Nueces Bay. And every day I walk along near Nueces River. And it was like, when I got here, after I lived here for a couple of years, I lived in different parts of the city until I found the apartment I want and I settled down, and I'm now expect to spend my life here. The Lord's told me this is my home. He provided it. And that little twinge about the Nueces River, he was giving me a message. You're going to know it when you're there. That's where I want you. But I had no clue that even referred to a place when I saw it on that street. I remember recognizing the twinge, though. I recognized it from the Boston experience. And I said, I wonder when I'm going to know why I was told to remember the name Nueces. And probably about 5 years passed between that twinge and my recognition that I'm standing on the banks of the Nueces River, and God's telling me this is where He wants me to be. Now, I did talk a little bit about quantum physics. So what am I doing with twinges? And one of the things Anthony Patch is always going on about is the fact that these people at CERN and these people working in advanced artificial intelligence with these quantum computers are trying to basically reconstruct the human brain. And they work on quantum at a quantum level. And we tend to think of our brains, if we're going to think about how they work, we tend to think of chemicals. You know, you can take a drug to change your mood, or electricity. You know, people have epileptic seizures. I know that at one point those were explained as something like short circuits, and we all know about electroshock treatments that used to be given for depression. So we think in those physical terms, but quantum physics is a bridge or a hybrid or a mixing of physical and dimensional terms. And this fellow that is often on the program, he's a co-host with Anthony Patch and Kevin Baker, Johnny Whistles. He said something and I went, aha, I knew it, that's it. They were talking about the scientific principle that the CERN scientists accept as normal, which is that if the scientist is observing a quantum particle, it collapses from the act of being observed, and you cannot observe it. So they're always designing these experiments to come up with explanations or particles that they can somehow understand in spite of not being able to directly observe them because of the quantum principle that the thing will collapse. And all of a sudden, Wessels comes out with, isn't that what happens in dreams? And I'm coming up to my limit here. I'm going to continue in my second video, Dreams and Collapsing Quantum. Denise Matteau, Visions of Mercy, over and out.